The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Ask the Experts, the Evolution of IT in the AEC Industry. My name is Kyla Natali, and I'm with Newforma. Before we begin today's presentation, first, just some general information about the webinar and the GoToWebinar platform. We encourage this to be as interactive as possible. So if you'd like to ask questions throughout the webinar, we do have time dedicated at the end for questions, and you can submit your question via the question pane in the GoToWebinar pane. And with some of those housekeeping items out of the way, it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenters. Andy Knauf, Chief Information Officer for Mead Hunt, and Ron Noden, Executive Vice President. Securely connecting Mead Hunt professionals with each other and our clients are Andy Knauf's primary concern. As head of the Information Technology Department, Andy stays on top of the latest information sharing, asset management, design, and communication technologies. By moving all data storage to the cloud, Andy is driving innovation, efficiency, and time and cost savings, as well as enhancing our capabilities to provide exceptional service to clients. Ron is deeply committed to organizational improvements and helping customers be more successful. Ron has served as CEO of one of Minnesota's fastest growing technology companies and as a principal in 16 startups. Ron assisted in the development of revolutionary technology advancement in retail distribution for one of the world's largest retailers. He loves to blend the power of technology with the power of talented people. Thank you both, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Kyla, and welcome, Andy. Great to have you here.
Good to be here, Ron.
We're going to have some fun today. We're going to talk about some things related to technology and the AEC, ACO industry, which I think is near and dear to both our hearts. As we were preparing for today, I'm just amazed by all the things that have happened so far in 2020. It's got more packed into it than probably a good couple of years normally has. So with all that's happened, maybe from your perspective, Andy, how have your plans changed based on the kind of the changing market and changing elements going on?
Well, I pretty much started off the year really concentrated on security. You know, when I was asked what were my top three things, it was security, security, security. Well, when COVID came around, the security really kind of took a back, I went to the back of the line, not too far back, because you always got to keep security at least in somewhat of the forefront. But really it was trying to make sure that all of our people would still be able to work, that we were still going to be able to function as a company. That obviously was the number one thing, because I mean, if you can't continue to work, if you can't be productive, especially in our industry, it doesn't take too long and you find yourself out of business.
Right.
So I mean, we definitely had to change things relatively quickly. We did it on the fly. We made some decisions really early on, and those decisions that we made paid off for us, that we were able to continue to work as efficiently as we did.
What kind of things did you end up having to do to keep people connected? And I know part of it is you want people to feel like they're still in an office environment, even though they're not. You want them to feel like they've got all the tools to work. What were some of the things that you did that kind of specifically drove to that?
Well, luckily, I guess it's been about 7.5, 8 years ago, we moved all of our data to the cloud. We got into a company called Panzera, and we really had a problem with organizing our data and how to share data, and then files getting overwritten with, at that time, about 26 offices. It was really a struggle for us. And now we're at 38 offices and 900 people. If we wouldn't have all of our data in the cloud, I'm not exactly sure how we'd even function as a company. So we started that journey by putting all of our data in the cloud. And then about 2.5 years ago, we went with a company called WorkSpot to handle those people that were working out of their homes and then working in the small offices. And what that did is it mimicked what we had in our bigger offices. So we didn't have to put a lot of equipment in the office. We were running our workstations up in Azure and in the cloud, And then we had our Panzura storage up in the cloud as well. So we had our workstations next to our data, and people were just able to work, and they were able to work on anything. So the small offices were, you know, we only had 4 or 5 people, didn't have to put the infrastructure in, got really inexpensive $500 or less laptops, and they're able to do the same thing that people on $3,000 workstations were able to do. So when COVID kicked in, we had 10 offices and a couple of home use people. We had about 50, 55 people using, the cloud BDI. Well, in 2 days' time, we went from 50 to 250 people using it. And it didn't matter what people had for networks at their home or what they were using or what they had for infrastructure. We were able to give them that same experience they had in the office at home, and we didn't lose any of our productivity. So it was nice that it was scalable, and we were able to do it in a short amount of time. Essentially, it was, we shut down on a Friday. Monday morning, nobody knew what to expect. We gave people an icon to click on, and they had all their tools that they needed. So we never lost any production, and there wasn't a learning curve on it, because everything that they had, everything that they used on Friday was the same on Monday. It's just they were sitting at home working and not sitting in the office anymore.
Nice. And when you look at that and the path to get there, what was, were there big difficulties? What was the biggest, hardest part of that to get in a short window, get all that in a position where everybody had their tools at their fingertips? From your perspective.
I feel like it was pretty easy. Our big thing was, what do we do? We made a decision that we were just going to say, take everything with you. We don't think the office is going to be set up or going to be able to come to next week. Take everything with you. So people piled up monitors and computers, and they took all that stuff home. And I guess the most difficult part was the fact that we had, monitor tree arms in the offices, and then we didn't have places to set monitors. I think that was the big problem for a lot of people. But there really wasn't a whole lot else that was a problem. Probably the biggest thing is just dealing with people's routers and how they had things set up. A lot of people, their wireless wasn't working all that great, so we'd have to hardwire into their routers. And we gave the advice, we're like, go out and buy a mesh router, a newer router. As anything 2 years or older, typically you're going to have some problems. So a lot of people went out and bought newer hardware and, just kind of settled in. But I think myself and everybody else thought, hey, this might only be a month and a half or maybe 2 months at most type problem. So we kind of planned for that. But then, with everybody else, as April was rolling around, we're like, this is going to take a whole lot longer. And then we started planning for, in August, what's going to look like in August. And those temporary home users kind of settled into more permanent home users. And today we're looking at upwards of maybe 30% of those people who don't want to go back to the office, and just want to stay at home. But I think that that's going to change a little bit, because it maybe gets a little bit old just being at home. I think 6 months down the road, people will think, second guess maybe staying at home all the time and wanting to get back in the office, because you kind of need that interaction. You got to be around some people as well.
Right. I know my wife and I have made up a mythical coworker named Cheryl, who doesn't do the dishes and isn't very nice, and we gossip about her all the time around the coffee pot. So that seems to help. There is some social aspect to this, and as you've made some of these changes based on the necessity of COVID and the marketplace, how has that impacted your vision of where you want to go from a technology standpoint as a company? What's your long-range, long-term impacts been on your vision, would you say?
Luckily, what we were looking forward, and really our company's 3 to 5 year plan is, I had envisioned, having 100% of our systems in the cloud, and then running all the workstations in the cloud. That's what I thought we were going to be at price isn't quite there, but it's getting there. So 90% of our infrastructure right now is in the cloud. We'll probably have 100% in by the end of the year. And as prices come down in workstations in the cloud, that's going to propel us to have all of our workstations in the cloud. So I envision everybody someday just doing 100% of what they're doing in the cloud. I've talked to several people who said, we'll never be in the cloud. It's not secure enough. It just isn't foolproof yet. And I'm like, really? I mean, we're replicated in 3 different regions across the US. The amount of bad things that would have to happen to have 3 Azure sites, Microsoft Azure sites, go down across the US is monumental. So I really believe in the cloud. I mean, we were early adopters, in cloud technology, and I mean, things just work for us. It really is the easy button for us right now because it's all there. We don't lose files. We don't have files overwritten. The security that Panzera provides us is better than any security you can pretty much get out there for data. And the work span, the VDIs is phenomenal. That is a huge market. There's so many people going into cloud VDI right now. There's so many players. That's really the future. Everybody will be in that someday because it doesn't matter what device you have. I can run Revit or Civil 3D off of my cell phone. Right. I don't need anything big. And if you're sending people home and all they have is their cell phone, man, how nice is it to run one of the hardest programs to run in Revit off of your cell phone on 2 monitors? That's pretty exciting, I would think, to most people.
Yeah, I would have to think that that's a game changer for everybody. It makes the office go anywhere, which is huge. So from your background and having dealt with this, are there things from a cloud provider that you were looking for that for those people that are listening in that might not have picked a cloud provider or might be all the way there? What are some of the things that you used as a crucible to make your decisions on who you're going to play with and work with in that regard?
Well, it started off with AWS and Amazon just because 8 years ago they were the big player. I mean, the other guys really weren't even around. I would say they were very small back then. And about 2 years ago or so, I made the change to go to Azure just because we have so much invested in Microsoft. We have an E5, we have so much of that infrastructure around Microsoft that it kind of made sense. And then our VDIs were hosted in Azure too, so it made sense to move my data over from AWS over to Azure. But I feel, like Google Cloud right now is making some huge avenues into this space, and they're expanding quite a bit too. So they're making a big run, on the industry. So it's tough today. Which way to go, because I think everybody wants to be a player. AWS kind of sat back on their heels saying, we had everything, we don't have to do anything. People are just going to come to us. But then they started losing some people. So it's really a horse race. And I think that's good for competition if between, Google, AWS, and Azure, if they're all in it. I don't think you can really go wrong on any of those. But for us, having what we have on Microsoft, it really fit in well. And then we just moved over to we moved our phone system into the Microsoft Teams platform too. So now all of our telephony is on Teams, so it's all integrated in there. So we're all in on the Microsoft page, and it's nice just getting one bill and all your everything that you have just shows up on one bill. So there's some nicety on that, but honestly, I don't think you could really go wrong with any of the players that are out there.
Nice. Well, I know as you start to look at with the changes from a cultural standpoint, not being in the office, the changes from the availability of all kinds of new levels of information. We're bombarded with all these additional elements that somewhere between really helpful information and analytics and maybe on the other side just completely buried in data. Some of it we can actually use. From a data standpoint, knowing that we're, the data, it's growing like leaps and bounds, whether you believe it's doubling every 21 months or whether you believe it's going to hit some crazy astronomical number in the next 4 years, it's just growing like crazy. What's your vision for how you're going to utilize data going forward? Is there some things you're going to change, or things you want to try to enhance as far as using that data for better and better use?
Well, I mean, yeah, data continues to grow, but there's a lot of things that are available out there. I think every one of the big three cloud providers has tiering on their data, and even with Newforma, we're starting to get into that too. So we're going to be able to take some of our older projects and have those archived to another server. So we just put Newforma cloud in place. So we've got our Newforma. We still have one on-prem, but we have one in the up in Azure, and we're going to probably expand that. And we're going to put another one up in Azure, but we're going to have the active files, be on one server, and then the non-active ones be on another, and kind of separate that. And that's how we're doing our other data. So our data that most likely we use all the time is going to be on one, and then it goes down to tiered storage, which is a lot cheaper. Right. Everybody on that's listening to this right now pretty much knows that probably 80 to 85% of their data is data they probably won't use again, or it's very infrequent, and especially in our industry, you get done with that project, you may go back to that project, there might be an addition, there might be something that needs to change, but it might be 20 years before that happens again, or it could be 50 years before that happens again. Right. So you hate to have all that data be live. So we've actually got a pretty good system in place of moving that data from hot storage now to that cooler storage, or whatever that is. Everybody has a little different name on it. So I'm not as concerned about big data, and a lot of the companies have that kind of built in, that the secondary data goes off, but it's not too far away. I don't want to get a phone call and say, hey Andy, I worked on this project 20 years ago. Can you transfer that back on the system? No, I don't want to do that. I want them to be able to go out there, hit that file, have that file transferred from cold storage to hot storage, and they were able to continue to work. And that is available today to do.
Right, and sometimes it's just as simple as, hey, it's been 10 years or 7 years or whatever it's been, and there's now some sort of trailing litigation coming out of it with those risk factors, and you just need to have the data to protect yourself.
Exactly.
And access is everything,
Yeah.
So I'm curious, from as a company, you've made some major changes in the way you do things. You've over the last several years, you've really brought the organization from one level of technology to a much higher level of technology and usage, and a number of different ways, including the cloud, but really in software and in other ways. And I'm curious, do you have a method of how you introduce things from a cultural standpoint to get the buy-in, or how do you get folks in your organization to really buy into the technology changes at the right level?
Well, that's always tough, because when I decided to move, we decided to move things to the cloud years ago. I felt like I had some support, and then when things didn't go so well early on, I kind of felt like I was an island, that it was myself against everybody in the company, because when we first moved, it was really, I'd say, it was more the bleeding edge, and we got bloody. Today it's a lot easier, but when we first moved in, it was tough. But the best week or 2 weeks of my entire 30-year career in this business were probably the third and fourth week of March, when all the stuff that we did and all the planning and everything, the accolades, and I didn't really understand what you were doing. We just kind of went along with what what you were saying, Andy. And now we get it. We understand the big picture. You're able to open up your toolbox and use all those tools. It's that insurance policy you get to check in, or check it out, and So I mean, it's always tough because as a IT director, CIO, whatever you are, the hardest thing to do is lay down that proposal for whatever that dollar amount is and say, this is what I think we need to do. There's other people in our industry that are doing this exact same thing. Hey, you know, CEO, we need to have money to do this. And they look at the number and they're like, we can't afford to do that. That's ridiculous. You know, how are we going to afford that? What we're doing now is fine. Well, then something like this happens or a disaster happens, and then you're like, man, I kind of wish we would have done that, you know. So
Right.
that's always tough, and I hear it all the time, you know, because the money thing comes up all the time. But for us today, we're a company that's 120 years old, and this is going to be our best year in 120 years, and that says something because a lot of companies are struggling right now. And this is going to be our best year ever. So, you know, sometimes you just gotta, you know, you gotta get out there and you gotta invest in the future. And we did a good job in investing in the future, and it's paying off for us right now.
Yep, that's a great point. And sometimes, especially in this particular industry, getting folks to invest in technology can be difficult because they'll start to equate it with, well, for that amount of money, I could hire 2 engineers and an architect. I could hire, and they start thinking in terms of kind of that old world version of what you can do for building blocks. And instead of looking at, you know, having the technology might mean the 20 engineers you have today are going to be 30% more efficient or whatever it is by getting the right tools set up the right way. And that might be more valuable to be scalable as an organization. I think that always comes into play as well. From your standpoint, when you look at those investments and you're either selling that investment internally or you're trying to determine internally if that's the investment you want to make, are there any guidelines you use to say, hey, that fits, that's kind of where we want to be on our road to technology? Is there some key area you like to look at or focus on?
Well, I mean, it's all part of the big equation, you know. I mean, I don't know if there's a key thing that we focus on. I mean, I've got really laser focused on moving everything to the cloud and making sure that every aspect of what we do engineering wise goes to the cloud. And there's some struggles yet because there's some older engineering programs that are not, you know, you're almost breaking the rules now. And I even had conversations with them like, you know, you said your software can only run in an office and you can't go over like a remote desktop or what have you. What do you do when everybody's at home now? And they're like, well, all right, so yeah, we can't really do that, you know, for you. I'm like, I can't use your software anymore if that's your, you know, your rules. So, you know, a lot of things have to change, you know, but I just feel putting, you know, looking, you know, to get your, you know, getting closer to the cloud, the sooner you can do it, the better off you're gonna be. I mean, I just see all the advantages in the world in that. And, you know, we had a lot of different things disaster related happen to us that really sparked, you know, some of our technology. But the COVID thing was that, I guess, that big disaster. We had an office burned down. We had hurricanes that affected some of our production. We had a 500-year flood at our main location that if we wouldn't have had Panzura, we would have lost, you know, $500,000 a day because people couldn't get access to their data. So all those little things kind of, you know, got us to that big thing today.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is when you start thinking, some of this has to be iterative, but having a goal in mind that is a target down the road where it's got enough lift to get you where you want to go. It's a huge piece of the puzzle. There's a question here from Jim who says, are there file replication delays between your cloud infrastructure and on-prem sites / local servers?
No delays. We have our cloud infrastructure. We have 4 different Panzura servers across the country, and there is no delay between our internal infrastructure, so of our on-prem devices, and then the cloud. Very very seamless. People don't even know. They just don't want to hit that file that they got access to it, and it gets in there.
Terrific. Yeah, I think if there's other questions, feel free to throw them out. We've got a few minutes left here, and any questions, we'd be glad to field those and get some feedback from Andy or any comments you'd like to make. Andy, as you look ahead to the rest of 2020, and thank goodness we're way past half over. What do you see as kind of your big priority as you look forward to the rest of this year from a technology perspective? Where do you see your focus being, and where do you want to go from here?
Well, right now I'm going back to that security model right now. I'm really nervous about some of the things. I mean, just in the last, was it 2 days ago, they had that big thing on the DNS issues where somebody could come into your network and get global admin rights to your system. Now, there's nobody that's listening right now that isn't just scared out of their minds thinking that somebody from wherever country can get into your system and have domain admin rights. That's game over. That's like the worst thing. I mean, your networks could get taken down, in less than a half an hour or so, or, it's mind-boggling to even think about that. So the better off you are, the more security or more money you can spend towards security, I think the better off you are. And then all the companies that we're dealing with now, the criteria for working with them, they're demanding that we have so much more security. They're demanding all these regulations. We're working with the Department of Defense, and what they require now for us on security is incredible. So we have to meet those demands. So right. We're back into that security mode and making sure we have it locked down. And what I explained to somebody, we had 35 offices. Well, we went from 35 offices to 900 offices in just a short amount of time. A little, maybe less than 900. We had 98% of our people go home. That's a hard job. It's hard to manage Netgears and, the stuff that is not enterprise grade systems, but they're still accessing our network like they're in the office. So there's more vulnerabilities, there's more things that are happening. It's added so much more work to our load to manage some of that. Mm-hmm. And then the vulnerabilities and attacks, they're a lot easier because it's hard to know where these people are logging in from. And there's just a flood of information anytime anybody does something out there.
Right, and the world's chock full of risk. And when you're trying to do a risk adverse model, whether it's in how you run a project or how you set up security or how you manage cash flow or whatever it is in your life, you're trying to be risk adverse. It almost seems like one of the best things we can always do is you have multiple plans. You have kind of your optimum plan and way things work, and then what are all the things that could knock me off my target, and how do I consider those things as things that I can get rid of the risk. Andy, I really appreciate the time today. This has been it's been great chatting with you. We're going to wrap up here. I don't see any other questions. I had a few comments on here, and you even got a couple bravos. So on vision, so that's good. Any final words you want to share? Any parting ideas that you want to share with the folks that are listening in?
I'm just always willing to share, the experiences and how we got to where we are. So if people want help or want to ping me on LinkedIn or whatever like that, I'm always happy to share. We're in a great group in the AEC group where there is a lot of sharing. It's a very good community. So I'm always happy to help when I can. And I always want everybody to be successful out there because, we're all in this together, and I'm just happy to help where I can.
Yeah, it's great to churn up new ideas too, where you're able to go, wow, I can try that, or I can apply that piece. And those conversations with industry peers can be hugely valuable that way. One final question, and this is probably the most important question of the day: Cabernet Sauvignon or Old Vine Zin? Which way do you go on that?
Man, that's tough. I mean, it's hard to beat a good cab, but I've had some really good old vine zins as well. But I think I would always lean towards, if I had a choice, Cabernet is still king as far as I'm concerned.
All right. Well, I'll keep tasting and trying to figure that out. I'll do my part for research. So, hey, Andy, it was great to see you. Thanks for the time today. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate it. And if you have additional questions, feel free to send those in. You've got contact information. We can share those. But thanks again. Kyla, any parting words from you before we go?
No, I just wanted to let everyone know that, thank you for coming to today's webinar, and we will have a recording available on our website probably within the next 24 hours.
Sounds great. Thanks, Andy. Take care. Thanks, Kyla.
All right, thanks,
Thanks for all attending. Appreciate it.